oil continues its climb. Within the next few years, gas prices could hit $7 a gallon, and that could force 10 million vehicles off the road as American families simply cannot afford to pay for gasoline. That is the finding of a new report from CIBC World Markets. Joining us now, the author of that report, Jeff Rubin. All right, Jeff, so let's just explain exactly what you're saying here. These are 10 million cars because the drivers won't be able to afford gasoline, right?
That's right. We're now predicting that oil will be $150 next year and $200 by 2010. That means that we're 2 years away from probably a 70% increase in pump prices. We'll be seeing roughly $7 a gallon gas, and at that gas level, we suspect that 10 million Americans will be taking the exit lane off the roads, an unprecedented decline in post-war history.
Now, are those Americans, when we talk about what this means for the auto sector, are those Americans who are driving old, already used jalopies here, or are you talking
it's a combination of both. It's the scrappage rate, which is getting rid of those old wrecks that are gas guzzlers.
Yep.
But it's also vehicle sales falling from right now 14 million to probably around 10, 11 million. And those are the levels back to the 1980s. It's also about Americans who stay on the road driving about 15% less. And it's also about changed vehicles. SUV and light trucks, which just 2 years ago were 60% of new car sales, will fall to less than half of that in the next couple of years.
You know, logically your numbers make sense, but realistically, come on. People will have no choice. They've got to get to work.
That's right.
They'll find a way.
That's
They'll find a way to keep the car on the road.
And that's why we only looked at the 54 million Americans who own a car and have access to public transit. Because you're absolutely right. If you live in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't matter what gasoline prices cost. But if you have an alternative within a half-an-hour walk to public transit, we're talking about a lot of people
in suburban or urban areas.
That's right.
With public transit.
And half of them will be from the 10 million American households who make less than $25,000 a year and incredibly drive more than one vehicle.
Should that not fix, though, the problem itself? I mean, I know that gasoline demand has dropped.
We're not driving the bus. You're asking,
but that's a big drop.
That's a big drop, and I'm assuming that the U.S. is going to consume 2.5 million barrels less of oil in 2.5 years than you're doing right now. But unfortunately, for every American who's coming off the road, there are 10 people chomping at the bit in Brazil, in India, in OPEC to get on the road.
Mark, you know, this is a question, because Mark looked at buying the smart car, and he decided not to, right? But you were looking at efficient options, and a lot of people would say, still am. A lot of people would say, still are. A lot of people would say they get in line. The Prius in certain places is a 6-month waiting list. GM has this Volt, but it may not come for another couple of years. What is the fastest? How quickly could we get real mass market options of a hybrid or something else?
We're probably 5 to 10 years away from that making a significant dent. In the interim, we got to get off the road. I mean, the only way of mitigating the impact of $200 oil is to consume less oil. And that's exactly what we got to do.
But, you know, Aaron's point about are there enough cars available, also there's an infrastructure problem.
Exactly.
You know, the city transit system
is not designed
don't have a lot of cars.
Exactly.
No.
And that's why.
And it uses gasoline,
and that's why we only looked at the 54 million Americans who have an alternative. But in time goes by, more and more Americans have to have that alternative. We've got to divert billions from highway construction to light rapid transit.
Oh, you know what that means, Mark? Pump up the gas tax, baby, and pump it back into infrastructure.
No, it's a good idea.
There was an article in the Washington Post just the other day about how their transit system in Washington does not have enough rail cars to meet the new demand. Anyway.
But in the meantime, Aaron, 11 million units is pretty grim news for Detroit.
Yeah, like they didn't already have a lot of grim news.
Jeff,
thanks